Welcome back to Philosophy and Ethics in Games, the series where I break down the stories in some of our favorite games and ask the tough questions to figure out what is right and what is wrong. I'm Josh Bearheart Hawk, and today, for the first time in this series, we're leaving the world of The Walking Dead and heading to Fabletown in The Wolf Among Us. In case you missed any of the previous episodes in the Philosophy and Ethics series, I've linked a playlist in the description below. As I continue to break down this and other games, I'll add new videos to the playlist so that you can find them all in one place. The Wolf Among Us is a game released by Telltale Games in episodic format, starting with the debut episode on October 11, 2013, and wrapping up its 5-episode run on July 8, 2014. It was based on the Fables comic series written by Bill Willingham, with the game taking place almost 2 decades prior to the events of the comic series. I'll admit that I've never read the comics, and I only ever played the first episode of the game when it released, as life got busy and I forgot the game even existed for a while. By the time I remembered it, the excitement for the game had passed, and I never really expected to pick it back up, at least until the community voted so heavily for it here on the channel. I also want to note, before we begin, that I'm going to be mainly brushing over a lot of the story as we go in favor of the big choices and scenes that I found to be the most interesting. When I started with the Walking Dead series, I spent too much time retelling the story and not enough time focusing on the actual philosophical questions raised, and I want to make sure that we're staying focused on the purpose of this series in general as we move through The Wolf Among Us and other games in the future. So with that out of the way, let's dive in and get to know Big B Wolf. For those who aren't familiar with the game, the characters involved are based on characters from popular and even lesser-known fairy tales. These characters are usually disguised as humans, using what is known as a glamour, but not all of them choose to play by the rules. Case in point, the first character we meet is a little toad man known as Mr. Toad, and I have to admit, I may or may not be overly familiar with some of these characters as they come up, but I'm going to do my best to get their names right. Feel free to let me know in the comments how bad I messed them up. Big B was called to the apartment building that Mr. Toad lives in to check on a disturbance, and upstairs we find none other than the woodsman from the tale of Little Red Riding Hood. He's not alone though, as we see him hurting an unidentified woman, and we have to decide the best way to handle the situation. I tried to be as diplomatic as possible here, mainly because violence, as a rule, should be the last resort in a situation, morally speaking. But the woodsman didn't really want to play nice, and I wound up choosing to throw him out, which really meant running through the wall of a second-story apartment with him and crashing into the cab owned by Mr. Toad in the street below. The fight doesn't end there, however, as the characters, known in universe as Fables, are apparently really hard to kill, and it takes an axe to the woodsman's head to make him chill out. This doesn't kill him, but it does present us with another choice when the woman he had been beating uses her heel to push the axe and cause the woodman a little unnecessary pain. We can choose to stop her or let her continue, and while stopping her might technically be the more moral choice, I couldn't bring myself to do it as she deserves a little payback. And speaking of payback, we're given yet another seemingly big choice to either let the woman go back to whoever her employer is empty-handed, or to give her whatever money Bigby has in his pocket to help her out. There isn't necessarily a moral or immoral choice here, but it is kind of an interesting thought experiment to consider. Let's put ourselves in Bigby's shoes for just a moment. Here's this girl that we've more or less just saved from a man who might have actually killed her, as he seemed to be much bigger and stronger than her. And to make matters worse, she wasn't even able to get the money that he owed her. It's insinuated here that she's a prostitute, and that line is even carried later on in the episode as the primary assumption about her, which explains the need for the money. The woodsman hired her, maybe even had done so at some point in the past, and she has to collect what he owes her, or risk even worse treatment from whoever is expecting the money. If we can do anything to help her out, isn't that the right choice? It gets a little complicated because it's not like we know Bigby's financial situation beforehand. If he had a family to feed and the cash in his pocket was all the money he had in the entire world, it might be argued that giving her anything would actually be a bad choice. If he has a ton of money in the bank and only has himself to worry about, giving her cash could easily be argued as the morally right decision. Some people might even be inclined to take a step further and judge her career as immoral, with Bigby only contributing to the immorality of the whole thing by giving her money that will ultimately go into her handler's pocket instead of hers. And that unravels a whole new line of issues because prostitution on its own isn't immoral. So long as no one's being hurt and everyone involved is a consenting adult, there's nothing morally wrong with exchanging money for any action. At the end of the day, the most moral choice with the limited knowledge we have of the situation would be to help her out and give her whatever Bigby has in his pocket, which winds up being $58. After she leaves, Bigby heads back to his apartment, running into both Beauty and the Beast, who seem to be having some kind of marital issue, along the way. Beauty seems to be sneaking out to do something, and the Beast winds up asking Bigby if he'd seen Beauty, and without more context, I chose to just mind my own business. I'm the sheriff of Fabletown, for God's sake, not a marriage counselor. Back in his apartment, and just trying to unwind, Bigby finds Colin, one of the three little pigs, sleeping in Bigby's armchair. I guess I never really connected the wolf in the story of the three little pigs with the same one that tried to eat Little Red Riding Hood, but here we are. Colin asks for a smoke and a drink before begging Bigby to not send him back to a place called the farm, and for some reason, I get the mental image of George Orwell when I talk about it. I guess Colin just seems like the type to lead an animal uprising or something. Bigby gets a short nap before a knock on the door introduces us to Snow White, who's apparently ditched the dwarves to pursue more political endeavors. She leads Bigby outside, where we find the head of the girl that we'd saved from the woodsman under the jacket of the security guard. Things just got interesting, but we apparently don't know yet who the girl even is. That mystery is solved with a visit to the business office. And when they first called it that, I assumed the term was some kind of placeholder that was accidentally left in the script. But it's actually called business office. The place seems to be some kind of storage room or interdimensional place where none other than Ichabod Crane seems to be in charge. Both Bigby and Snow White also work there, each having their own desk, and I can't help but think about when I was a kid and my brothers and I used to pretend we worked in an office, setting up desks and piling papers in various places. Yeah, I had a boring childhood at times, but that's beside the point. I'll be honest here, I can't stand Ichabod Crane, and I actually tried to tell him off as Bigby before Snow White stopped me. He's the kind of boss that doesn't really deserve to be in charge of anything, and I'm hoping I have a chance to rip into him at some point in a future episode. That being said, he only sticks around long enough to deride Bigby and Snow for not doing their jobs well enough before leaving to apparently get a morning massage. As soon as he's gone, we meet a little green flying monkey named Buffkin that I can only assume used to be in the employ of the Wicked Witch of the West. He might just be one of my favorite characters in the game, though I'll hold judgment for later episodes. Buffkin helps us out by finding some lore books that wind up revealing the name of the mystery girl to be Faith. She was married to someone known as Prince Lawrence, and a look in the magic mirror reveals that he's in some kind of trouble. But the prince isn't the only one who might be in trouble, as a phone call from Mr. Toad lets us know that he too is facing a problem and may need our help. And now we have to choose who to go out to first. Ideally, with Bigby being the sheriff and all, there would be some officers to help out so we could cover both at once. But it seems that Bigby is a one-man show. To me, Mr. Toad seemed a little overdramatic the first time we met him. And for all we know, he could just be the type to try and stir up trouble. On the other hand, the magic mirror showed us that Prince Lawrence was sitting in a chair with a bloody knife on the ground at his feet and a bottle of pills on the table next to him, and it seems to point to him possibly being involved in some way in Faith's murder. As the murder mystery is front and center at the moment, going to check on the prince makes the most sense. And we find Prince Lawrence apparently dead from a gunshot wound in his house. But all is not as it seems, as he suddenly wakes up and confesses to shooting himself as he feels he is too much of a burden on Faith. Whatever issues they may have had get pushed back, however, as someone breaks into the apartment, and before long, Bigby is chasing someone who I initially thought was Humpty Dumpty through the streets of the city. It turns out the intruder was Tweedledee, and his brother, Tweedledum, knocks Bigby out before we can get too many answers. Heading back to the woodsman's apartment, Bigby and Snow White find Mr. Toad calming his son down and acting extremely suspicious. He claims there was really nothing going on and that his call was a false alarm, but a quick inspection of his apartment tells us that he was lying. Now, it's probably possible to get him to admit to whatever is going on with a little bit of persuasion, but playing good cop wasn't really getting me anywhere, so I went full on bad cop, slapping Mr. Toad a couple of times before the terrified look of his son made me chuckle way more than it probably was meant to. It could probably be considered police brutality, all things considered, but slapping him did get the information Bigby needed, as Mr. Toad admitted that Tweedledum had paid him a visit before showing up to save Tweedledee. He was looking for the coat that Faith had been known for wearing, a cloak made from the skin of her father's prized donkey. But thankfully, Mr. Toad hadn't given it up, and instead kept it until Bigby and Snow White showed up. After finding a note addressed to Prince Lawrence from Faith that was attached to the cloak, Bigby and Snow White catch a cab and head to the Trip Trap, a bar the woodsman apparently frequents. Snow White heads back to the business office, while Bigby goes inside the bar to look for the woodsman. The bar is rather quiet, with only the bartender and another patron there. But after a little back and forth, with the bartender giving Bigby a little attitude and lying about not having seen the woodsman, the lumberjack comes out of the bathroom and agrees to talk, at least at first. During the course of the conversation, we find out the woodsman only saved Red Riding Hood and her grandmother because he thought that he would get a reward. He had been planning to rob the grandmother and only changed his mind when he found the big bad wolf in her bed. This is mainly relevant because up to this point, he's been a main suspect in Faith's murder, and after a fight with the other patron in the bar, Grindel, of Beowulf fame, we find ourselves with the final big choice of the episode when Tweedledee shows up and we need to pick between chasing him down or arresting the woodsman. As much as I would like the woodsman to be guilty, especially after hearing about his original intention with Red Riding Hood's grandma, I think he's actually innocent. It's one of those things that my fake detective gut tells me, and I have to go along with it if I really want to be the best sheriff of Fabletown that I can be. Making a quick decision, I head for Tweedledee and make the arrest as the woodsman escapes through what I can only assume is a back door in the bathroom. But Tweedledee will have to wait as the episode ends on a twist. As they return to the business office, a massive police presence tells Bigby that something is wrong, and he makes his way through the line only to discover a second head has been placed on the doorstep of the building. Snow White's. So with episode 1 in the books, I'm excited to hear what choices you made as you played through. Did you give Faith money? Who did you go to see first, Lawrence or Toad? Who do you think is responsible for the murders? Let me know in the comments below, but try not to spoil it as I'm really enjoying going into this blind, and there may be others out there who haven't played it yet. For those who want to support the channel in other ways, while getting some cool perks like early access, behind the scenes, and their name in the video, I've got channel memberships and a Patreon. If you liked the video and want to see more, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future videos. Next week, we'll be covering episode 2 of The Wolf Among Us, and I've got a lot of really great stuff planned for the next couple of months, so make sure to keep an eye on the community tab here on YouTube for the latest info on what's coming. For now, I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.